Now on Denver 7 News, heavy rain across Colorado with the threat of flash floods in multiple burn scars. Our Denver 7 weather team is tracking the danger.
This little building, as little and plain as it is tied to so much history.
Plus, the former home of a beloved restaurant is getting a second chance. How the historic building could be saved from demolition at the last second.
This exhibit is about the Japanese-American experience in Five Points.
And a new museum highlights a chapter of Denver's history long forgotten by those living there now.
We start off tonight with a look at the live radar and outside. Storms are brewing all across Colorado, pouring rain from the high country to the eastern plains.
And take a look at this video from a viewer in Larimer County. You can see the rising water caused by heavy rains making people very nervous there. This is along Streamside Drive in the Retreat in Glen Haven near the Cameron Peak burn scar. And tonight there is risk of flash flooding in multiple burn scar locations.
And this is a live look picture right now from outside the storm truck driving north of Castle Rock. You can see wet roads there along the freeways. Very good idea to leave a lot of space between your car and the car in front of you. Let's get right over to meteorologist Stacey Donaldson. Stacey, many weather warnings are issued right now.
That's right, and we cooled things down today. Instead of the 90s and 100s, we were in the 80s for afternoon highs today, even in the 70s up toward Fort Collins. And thanks to all of this rainfall, we have some rain-cooled air out there as well. But some of the rain, the storms moving through and the heavy rain is affecting areas in ways that we're seeing flooding. So we have a flood watch in effect here for the eastern plains, a flash flood watch in effect for the higher elevations and into our mountainous areas off to the west. So just to our south is where we have a flash flood watch in effect until midnight. Flash flood watches in effect for the higher elevations, and now a flood warning in effect for Fort Morgan and also the area we were just looking at up in the burn scar areas off to the west of Fort Collins. It's all this heavy rain pushing through our area and parts east. So we have heavy rain from Fort Morgan all the way down toward Deer Trail and Lyman. Most of the rain up toward Estes Park has moved out, but we're really keeping an eye on these storm cells moving northeastward. So very heavy rainfall coming down at perhaps 2 inches per hour in some of these regions. So that's why we're having flooding issues here around Fort Morgan and up in the higher elevations. Also down to the south, we have heavy rain toward Colorado Springs, Colorado City, and near Walsenburg. So for the rest of tonight, we'll see these storms move eastward, and we should be clearing out as we head through the overnight hours, with temperatures staying mostly in the 60s as we go through the overnight. Now we'll talk about next week and how much stormy weather we're expecting coming up.
Stacey, we'll see you just shortly. Thank you. A building that once housed a beloved Fort Collins Mexican restaurant was set to be demolished, but in a turn of events, a commission determined the building is eligible to become a historical landmark.
And Denver 7's Patrick Perez spoke to the new and previous owners about what this means for the building's future.
The building that once housed Pobre Panchos in Fort Collins is getting a second chance.
This little building, as little and plain as it is tied to so much history with its story.
Monica Bird and her family owned the Mexican restaurant for more than 5 decades. When it struggled during the pandemic, they sold most of the ownership to a longtime customer who wanted to keep it afloat. But the new owner permanently closed its doors in March of this year, citing COVID financial strain and unforeseen circumstances.
It's gutted. The salt and pepper shakers are gone. Everything is taken.
Monica and her family thought this would be the end of their story here until Raising Cane's took interest in the site. That triggered a historical review because of the building's age, which found the building is eligible to become a landmark. The owner and his council appealed that decision.
They put over $100,000 into the restaurant to make it survive, and it just didn't work. So now they can't get out from under it.
They argue by designating it as a landmark, it can't, for example, be sold to Raising Cane's, as it can't be demolished, and any future uses would be limited.
If the property is designated as a historic landmark, it is likely that the property may remain vacant for years to come.
But by a vote of 7-0 Wednesday, the Fort Collins Historic Preservation Commission found it can be a landmark, a blow to the owner.
Very burdensome position to put the property owner in.
But a win for Monica's family.
We're going to go in that direction and see where it takes us.
What comes next of this building is entirely up to the owner. Monica would like to see it become a community center.
This building being here is more important than ever because people have forgotten the history of the United States, the history of even our town. the community, the Latino community.
We reached out to the lawyer representing the property owners to find out what they plan to do with this building now. That lawyer had no comment. In Fort Collins, I'm Patrick Perez, Denver 7.
Patrick, thank you. Monica's family says they are currently working on submitting the paperwork to designate the building as a landmark, but the new owners can still appeal the commission's decision.
Today in downtown Denver, an early celebration for Peru's Independence Day. Mi Casa Peru put on the festival in Denver's La Raza Park. It features plenty of live music, as you see, dancing, and of course, delicious Peruvian food.
We use special props. Other dances, we use hankies and barefoot, and then we have baskets on top of our heads, and the other ones are just zapateos. This Peruvian culture is amazing. Everyone, I mean, as you can see, everyone here is just so kind, and it's just an amazing place to be around.
I love Peruvian culture, and this festival will go on until 9 o'clock tonight. Denver 7 is a proud sponsor.
Well, I guess it goes without saying that here in Denver, our community is made up of people who represent many different cultures.
That's right. Denver 7's Micah Smith tells us about a new museum in 5 Points, opening up a chapter of Denver's history that some never knew existed.
Denver's 5 Points neighborhood has remnants of Colorado's Black history up and down each of its streets. But a new exhibit is exploring lesser-known stories of another community that also called 5 Points home.
There was this thriving Japanese community mixed in with this thriving African-American community.
Courtney Ozaki is the founder of the Japanese Arts Network, one of the organizations behind the exhibit Stories of Solidarity, Japanese Americans in 5 Points, currently on display at the Savoy.
This exhibit is about the Japanese American experience in 5 Points and the history of Japanese people both prior to and after World War II.
Ozaki says after the war, when Japanese Americans were released from internment camps like Amachi, they saw Colorado as a welcoming place to start a new life, but still face discrimination.
So just like the African American community, and redlining made it so that this was really the only viable place for them to rebuild, to own businesses, to live. It was the only place they could afford to be.
Along with the exhibit, Ozaki says the network is collecting oral histories from Japanese Coloradans, including her parents who grew up in 5 Points.
So this is a picture of my father's family, the Ozakis, outside of that place where they lived on Larimer Street.
Ozaki says despite the many hardships 5 Points residents faced, there were so many beautiful intersections of culture.
I love hearing the stories of Manual High School because that's also where many of the residents from the 5 Points, Curtis Park, Whittier neighborhoods all went to this high school together.
And Ozaki says this project will preserve these kinds of memories for new generations, uncovering 5 Points' diverse history. Reporting in 5 Points, Micah Smith, Denver 7.
Police in southeast Colorado are investigating a double murder-suicide. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation says that the suspect in Lamar shot 3 people, killing 2 of them before taking his own life after a police chase. The condition of the surviving victim is unknown. CBI says they do not know the relationship between the victims or what motivated the shooting.
Denver police are investigating a wrong-way crash that killed 2 people and injured 3 others overnight. This happened around midnight on South Santa Fe Drive near West Mississippi Avenue, as you can see here. Police say a truck was going south in the northbound lanes, hit an SUV. The 2 people in that SUV were killed, and the 3 people in the truck suffered non-life-threatening injuries. Police arrested the driver of the truck.
Denver District Attorney Beth McCann concluded that a police shooting from last year was justified. In June of 2021, 3 DPD officers shot and killed Colton Wagner in Martin Luther King Jr. Park. The DA says that Wagner pointed a gun at the officers and walked towards them, ignoring commands to drop the gun, which she says justified the shooting. District Attorney McCann will hold a virtual community meeting tomorrow at 5 p.m. to discuss the incident and her conclusion.
This November, recreational marijuana will be on the ballot in Colorado Springs. Supporters gathered signatures from nearly 100,000 registered voters to petition to legalize the recreational marijuana sales there. That's nearly 5 times the number needed to get the issue on the ballot. Along with legalizing recreational sales, voters will also decide on a 5% sales tax. If approved, sales would begin early next year. Currently, only sales of medical marijuana are legal in Colorado Springs.
This week, Spirit Airlines shareholders are expected to vote on a proposed buyout by Frontier Airlines. The vote is scheduled to happen on Tuesday, but that's not for certain. The past 4 votes have been canceled due to a lack of support from investors. That's because of a competing bid from another airline, JetBlue, which is offering about $1 billion more than Frontier. Spirit is advising shareholders to stick with the Frontier deal, as regulators are less likely to block it from happening.
The popular Sexy Pizza's Capitol Hill location is closing its doors after today. Here's why. A co-owner of the Colorado pizza chain says they did not renew their lease because of an ongoing dispute with the property owner. They say the owner put rocks outside their building to stop homeless people from camping out in front of the shop. Now, our partners at the Denver Post report that one of the shop's co-owners used to be homeless and does not agree with the building owner's decision. Sexy Pizza still has 3 other stores open here in Denver.
All right, still to come, climate change is causing major damage to Utah's Great Salt Lake. Why that could mean toxic chemicals are now being spread across the state.
Plus, a massive wildfire in California forces hundreds to flee. The latest on firefighters' efforts to slow it down.